Nice costume, Pops. Get that jacket from a thrift store. The young pilot's laughter carried across the tarmac as he gestured at the old man's worn leather flight jacket. Real pilots don't look like retired accountants. What that cocky aviator didn't know was that he'd just insulted the man who'd written half the tactics manual he'd studied in flight school. Comment, salute, if you believe legends don't need to announce themselves. The sky above Nellis Air Force Base was cloudless and brilliant, perfect weather for the annual Airshow that drew tens of thousands of spectators and hundreds of military personnel. The event was part demonstration, part recruitment, part celebration of Air Force heritage, with static displays of aircraft spanning decades alongside modern marvels of aviation technology. Among the crowds wandering between F-35s and vintage Mustangs was a figure who seemed completely out of place. Robert Falcon Hutchins was 76 years old, and he looked every year of it. His skin was pale and papery, mapped with age spots and deep wrinkles that spoke of too many years under harsh suns at high altitudes. He stood maybe 5'7", his frame carrying the soft weight that often comes with age, a small rounded belly pressing against his shirt. His hair was thin and white, combed carefully over a spotted scalp. To casual observers, he looked like someone's grandfather who'd gotten separated from his tour group. But he wore a leather flight jacket, clearly vintage, the kind A2 jacket that pilots had worn for generations. The leather was butter soft with age, worn smooth at the elbows and collar. Various squadron patches adorned it, faded now, but still visible, along with some embroidered insignia that most people wouldn't recognize. Robert wore it with quiet pride as he walked slowly through the displays, pausing occasionally to examine aircraft with an intensity that suggested more than casual interest. His movements were deliberate, careful, the gait of someone whose body had absorbed too many high-G maneuvers and too many hard ejections over the years. Captain Derek "Viper" Chen noticed the old man immediately. At 29, Chen was everything Robert wasn't. Tall, fit, radiating the physical confidence that came from being in peak condition. He was an F-16 pilot with 2 combat deployments, a rising star being considered for the F-35 program, and possessed the kind of swagger that could tip into arrogance when unchecked. He stood with a group of fellow pilots near an F-16 display, signing autographs for kids and posing for photos, very much enjoying being the center of attention. When he spotted Robert examining a vintage F-4 Phantom with unusual focus, something about the old man's jacket irritated him. "Hey, check out Grandpa with the Top Gun cosplay," Chen said to his buddies, his voice deliberately loud enough to carry. His fellow pilots, all young and confident in their own right, laughed. Lieutenant Brad Morrison, Chen's wingman, grinned. "Dude, that jacket's probably older than we are. Think he bought it on eBay?" More laughter. Chen walked toward Robert, his stride confident, his expression amused. "Excuse me, sir. Nice jacket. Where'd you get it? There's a vintage store downtown that sells replicas if you're interested in something that actually fits." Robert turned slowly, his pale blue eyes meeting Chen's dark ones. For a moment, he said nothing, just studied the young pilot with an expression that was impossible to read. "It fits fine, son. I've worn it for 53 years. His voice was soft, slightly raspy, the voice of someone who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. Chen's smile widened. 53 years. "Sir, with all respect, that jacket looks like it should be in a museum. And honestly, you look more like a retired accountant than a pilot. No offense." "Some taken," Robert replied mildly, but his eyes had gone cooler. He started to turn back to the F-4, clearly not interested in engaging further. This only seemed to irritate Chen more. He was used to reactions, to people engaging with his charisma or at least responding to his authority as an officer. The old man's dismissal felt like disrespect. "I'm just saying, sir, there are a lot of people here who actually earn their wings. People who fly real missions, maybe don't go around pretending to be something you're not. Stolen valor is a serious thing." The words hung in the air, sharper than Chen had perhaps intended. Morrison looked uncomfortable now. Hey, Viper, maybe, but Chen was committed now, his ego driving him forward. I mean, look at you, short, out of shape, probably haven't seen the inside of a cockpit in your life, but you wear that jacket like you're some kind of hero. It's disrespectful to actual pilots. Robert's expression hadn't changed, but something in his stillness suggested a deep well of patience being drawn upon. Captain, he said quietly, reading Chen's rank from his uniform, I understand how it looks. I'm old. I don't fit your image of what a pilot should be. That's fair. I'll just enjoy the show and stay out of your way. He started to walk away, his pace slow and measured. Several bystanders had stopped, drawn by the confrontation, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to disapproving of Chen's behavior. That's when the sound cut through everything else. The distinctive roar of an F-22 Raptor approaching fast. All heads turned skyward as the fifth-generation fighter screamed overhead in a low pass that rattled chests and set off car alarms. It was an unscheduled appearance, not part of the advertised program, and it was performing maneuvers that had the crowd gasping, a vertical climb that seemed to defy physics, a high G turn that compressed clouds into vortices, a speed demonstration that left sonic signatures hanging in the air. The pilot was showing off, but with such precision and control that it transcended showboating and became art. The Raptor circled once more, then came in for a landing on the main runway, its approach perfect. As it taxied toward the display area, an unusual amount of activity began around the tarmac. High-ranking officers were emerging from the VIP area, moving with purpose. A 3-star general staff car was approaching rapidly. The F-22 came to a stop and the canopy opened. The pilot who emerged was a woman, probably in her 40s, with the bearing of someone extremely competent and completely confident. She climbed down, removed her helmet, and her eyes scanned the crowd until they locked onto Robert Hutchins standing alone near the F-4 display. She walked directly toward him, her stride purposeful, and as she approached, she came to attention and rendered a sharp salute. General Hutchins, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, requesting permission to approach. The words carried across the now silent crowd. Robert returned the salute with practiced precision, and suddenly his posture was different, straighter, more commanding, the years seeming to fall away from his bearing, if not his appearance. At ease, Colonel. That was some impressive flying. The Raptor suits you. General. The word rippled through the crowd like an electric shock. Chen felt the ground shift beneath him, his face draining of color. Martinez smiled. Sir, I wouldn't be flying anything if it weren't for you. You taught my instructor, who taught me. Everything I know about pushing a fighter to its limits without breaking it came from your legacy. More officers were arriving now. Major General Patricia Hayes, commander of the Warfare Center, approached and also saluted Robert. General Hutchins, we didn't know you were attending today. If we'd known, we would have prepared proper honors. Robert waved a hand dismissively. No need, Patricia. I just wanted to see the birds, walk around. I'm retired, not royalty. But Hayes shook her head firmly. Sir, you're Robert Falcon Hutchins. You have more combat hours than any pilot in Air Force history. You flew in Vietnam, the Gulf War, and did classified missions we still can't talk about. You were the first American pilot to ever down a MiG-29 in combat. You helped design the Air Combat Tactics Manual that every fighter pilot studies. You trained 3 generations of aviators. You earned 2 Air Force Crosses, 5 Silver Stars, and the Medal of Honor. Retired or not, you're Air Force royalty. The crowd had swelled now, people pressing closer to catch a glimpse of the legend they hadn't recognized. Chen stood frozen, his earlier swagger completely evaporated, replaced by crushing mortification. Every word Hayes spoke was another hammer blow. The short, chubby old man in the vintage jacket was General Robert Hutchins. one of the most decorated and respected pilots in military history, and Chen had accused him of stolen valor. Martinez spoke up, her voice carrying. General Hutchins is also the reason we have Hafu. Our current fighter tactics. When he was flying F-4s in Vietnam, she gestured to the very aircraft Robert had been examining. He revolutionized air combat maneuvering. He's credited with developing the tactics that directly led to 17 confirmed kills by his squadron. Later, he was one of the test pilots for the F-15 program, and he helped refine the F-22's flight characteristics. The jacket he's wearing? That's not a replica. That's the actual jacket he wore during Operation Desert Storm when he flew missions that are still classified. Hayes added, "We've been trying to get General Hutchins to come speak at the Academy for years. He always refuses, says he doesn't like the attention. He's the most humble man I've ever met." Robert looked uncomfortable now with all the attention, but Martinez wasn't done. She turned, scanning the crowd until her eyes found Chen. "You, Captain, were you the one giving the general a hard time about his jacket?" Chen wanted to disappear into the tarmac. He stepped forward, his face burning with shame, his voice barely audible. "Yes, ma'am, I was. I didn't know. I said terrible things. I accused him of—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. He turned to Robert, came to rigid attention, and saluted. "General Hutchins, sir, I have no excuse. I was disrespectful, judgmental, and completely out of line. I insulted a true hero because I made assumptions based on appearance. I'm deeply, profoundly sorry, sir." Robert studied the young captain for a long moment. The crowd was silent, waiting. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice still soft but carrying clearly. "Captain Chen, at ease." Chen dropped the salute but remained rigidly upright. Robert continued, "I accept your apology, and I understand where it came from. You're young, accomplished, confident. You look at someone like me, old, soft, not fitting the image of what you think a warrior should look like, and you make judgments. It's human nature." He paused, his pale eyes holding Chen's. "But here's what you need to learn, and learn fast. Physical appearance means nothing. I was short and stocky even when I was flying combat missions. I was never the tallest or the strongest or the most physically imposing. But I could outfly men twice my size because I understood the aircraft, I understood tactics, and I never let ego override judgment. Some of the finest pilots I ever knew didn't look like recruiting posters. They looked like librarians and accountants and mechanics. They were unassuming, quiet, humble, and they were absolutely lethal when they needed to be." He took a step closer to Chen. "You judged me by appearance and almost missed an opportunity to learn something. What if I'd been someone else? What if I'd been a combat veteran with PTSD who needed respect, not mockery? What if I'd been a retired crew chief who'd kept your aircraft flying for 30 years? You made assumptions, and assumptions in our line of work get people killed in the air. You can't afford to underestimate anyone or anything based on how it looks." Chen's voice was thick. "You're absolutely right, sir. I let arrogance blind me. It won't happen again." Robert nodded slowly. "See that it doesn't. You're a good pilot, Captain. Colonel Martinez speaks highly of you, but being a good pilot isn't enough. You need to be a good officer, a good leader, a good man. That means respecting everyone until they prove they don't deserve it, not the other way around." Hayes spoke up. "General, would you consider joining us in the VIP area? We'd be honored to have you for the rest of the Airshow." Robert smiled slightly. "I appreciate that, Patricia. But I came here to walk around, see the aircraft, enjoy the day like everyone else. I don't need special treatment." Martinez grinned. "How about a compromise, sir? Let me give you a personal tour, show you the Raptor up close, answer any questions. Just you and me, no ceremony. And maybe you could share some stories. I'd love to hear about your F4 days." Robert's face softened. "That I could do. As Martinez led Robert toward the F-22, the crowd parting respectfully now with people thanking him for his service, Chen stood watching, processing the magnitude of his mistake and the grace with which it had been handled. Morrison put a hand on his shoulder. That was rough, man. Chen nodded slowly. I deserved worse. I basically spit on a living legend because he didn't look the part. What kind of officer does that make me? Over the following days, the story spread through Air Force channels, becoming both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Chen requested permission to formally apologize again, which Robert granted, meeting him for coffee and turning it into a mentoring session about leadership, humility, and judgment. The young captain emerged changed, his swagger replaced by something deeper, confidence tempered with humility, ambition guided by wisdom. He became an advocate for respecting veterans, regardless of appearance, and eventually, years later, he would tell the story to his own students as a warning about the cost of arrogance. Robert Hutchins returned to his quiet retirement, still avoiding attention, still uncomfortable with praise. But the image of that day, the legendary pilot in his vintage jacket, teaching a younger generation through grace rather than anger, became iconic. A photo from the Airshow showing Robert talking with Martinez beside the F-22 now hangs in the Air Force Academy with words Robert had spoken to Chen. Never judge capability by appearance. The most dangerous pilots I ever knew looked like librarians. The finest warriors often walk in silence. Pay attention, show respect, and you might learn something that saves your life. Subscribe to our channel if you believe that true excellence doesn't need to look impressive, that the greatest heroes often walk among us unrecognized, and that the measure of character is found not in how we treat those above us, but in how we treat those we assume are beneath us.